Have you ever caught yourself living in a place that does not exist yet? Not physically, mentally. I used to spend entire stretches of my day negotiating with tomorrow, planning the next step, rehearsing the next milestone, calculating the next version of myself. I believe progress meant constant preparation. I thought anticipation was intelligence. I called anxiety responsibility. And without realizing it, I abandoned the only territory where life actually happens, the present moment. There's an old saying I once heard: today holds more value than a perfect tomorrow. At first it sounded poetic. Later I understood it was a warning, because my life was built around a dangerous sentence. I'll enjoy it later. Later when I earn more. Later when I'm promoted. Later when I feel secure. Later when I finally deserve to breathe. While I was building that imaginary future, real life kept knocking, and I kept missing it. This is my story. I was 29, living in Portland, working at a fast-growing tech company that promised innovation, disruption, and a better world. On paper, everything about my life looked precise and intentional. Stable income, clean apartment, reliable car, clear career path. But satisfaction never stayed longer than a few seconds. Every achievement instantly became a checkpoint instead of a destination. Finish a project, start worrying about the next one, reach a goal, calculate a bigger one, sit with friends, mentally rehearse Monday's meeting. My body existed in the present. My mind rented property in the future. I woke up at 12 a.m. every day, not because I loved discipline, but because I feared falling behind. I trained at the gym imagining the man I would become someday. I drank coffee while studying productivity systems designed to optimize a life I wasn't even experiencing. I accepted extra assignments not out of passion, but strategy. Weekends became preparation zones for opportunities 5 years away. I wasn't living. I was postponing existence. Inside my head, there was a permanent checklist. When I get promoted, when I buy a house, when I save more, when I become ready, the present was just an obstacle between me and permission to feel fulfilled. And strangely, I wasn't miserable in the obvious sense. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I didn't complain. I simply never arrived. Friends noticed first. I showed up everywhere, yet nowhere. Conversations passed through me instead of reaching me. Every invitation triggered the same answer: let me check my schedule. Free time felt dangerous. It wasn't productive. One birthday, my mother called. We spoke for 12 minutes. After hanging up, I realized I couldn't recall a single thing she said because I had been answering emails while she talked. My life was moving fast but directionless, like running on a treadmill facing a painted horizon. Then came the moment that cracked the illusion. For about 8 months, I worked relentlessly on a massive company project. Late nights, lost weekends, canceled plans. I was convinced it would secure my promotion. I calculated everything. Effort in, reward out. The project succeeded. The company saved nearly $1.1 million. My manager congratulated me. 2 weeks later, the promotion went to someone else. Not due to competence, but compatibility. He fit the culture better. In other words, he belonged socially. That night I sat in my apartment, perfectly organized, silent, untouched. No photos, no memories, no signs of life. It looked like a waiting room, and I finally understood why. I hadn't been living there. I had been pausing there, waiting for permission to live later. I checked my phone. Dozens of unread messages. Friends who stopped trying. An ex who once told me, "Being with you feels like talking to someone who was never here." My brother had a child I barely met. That was the moment I faced a terrifying realization. I wasn't sacrificing life for the future. I was replacing life with the future. And the future never arrived. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I finally admitted something I had been avoiding for years. I hadn't been building a life. I had been postponing it. For the last several years, I had lived in a permanent state of almost. Almost there. Almost successful enough. Almost ready to relax. Almost happy. I kept waiting for the perfect moment. The right title, the right income, the right security. I told myself fulfillment would begin after the next milestone. But every time I reached one, another appeared beyond it. There was always another later, and later never arrived. I picked up my phone that evening and scrolled slowly. Dozens of unanswered messages, missed calls, conversations that had gone cold. Friends who had stopped trying because I had trained them to expect nothing. An ex-girlfriend, Olivia, once told me, "Being with you feels like dating someone who's never actually here." I had dismissed it as emotional exaggeration. Now I understood. My brother had a newborn son. I had visited twice in almost a year. I had convinced myself I was busy building a future that would allow me to be a better uncle someday. Someday. I had invested everything into a tomorrow that wasn't guaranteed. Worse, I had sacrificed something certain for something hypothetical. It was as if I had willingly handed away $60 in cash today for a vague promise of $120 next year, without any contract, without any certainty, without even knowing if next year would look the way I imagined. And that was when the doubt crept in. Not sadness, not anger, doubt. Had I misunderstood success from the beginning? Had I mistaken obsession for ambition? Had I confused constant tension with discipline? Let me be clear. I am not against planning. I am not against growth. I am not against improvement. But I had turned growth into an addiction. I was chasing the next step before digesting the current one. I was sprinting before feeling my feet hit the ground. Every achievement became invisible the moment it was earned. That pattern created a silent anxiety that never left me. Because when you live only for what's next, you train your nervous system to believe that now is never enough. And when now is never enough, peace becomes impossible. The following Saturday, something inside me shifted. Instead of optimizing my weekend, I walked out of my apartment without an objective. No productivity plan, no calendar block, no measurable outcome. It felt uncomfortable, like stepping outside without armor. I wandered through downtown Portland and eventually entered a small cafe I had passed hundreds of times, but never noticed. Plants framed the windows. Soft music drifted through the air. No urgency, no rush. I ordered coffee and sat near the window. That's when I noticed him. An older man, perhaps in his early 70s. White hair, simple clothes, upright posture, a cup of tea in his hand, and a worn-out book resting calmly in his lap. But what struck me wasn't his appearance. It was his presence. He looked settled, not bored, not distracted, not checking a device, not calculating, just there. Something in me felt drawn to that stillness. I leaned slightly toward him. "Excuse me," I said. "You seem very calm. What's your secret?" He looked up and smiled gently. "Secret?" he repeated. "I don't have one. I'm simply here. Here. Yes, in this cafe, in this moment. Not yesterday, not tomorrow." His answer irritated me at first. It sounded too simple, almost naive. I nearly responded with something sarcastic about retirement, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "May I join you?" He nodded. That conversation changed the trajectory of my thinking. His name was Daniel. He had been an engineer, built a career, raised 3 children, lived what most would call a responsible, productive life. "I didn't learn how to truly live until I turned 62, he told me, looking straight into my eyes. "Before that, I was always somewhere else." I felt exposed. "You're constantly calculating your next move, aren't you?" he asked. I froze. "How do you know?" "Because I used to carry that same tension in my face." He told me he had spent over 40 years postponing joy. Promotions first, vacations later, time with family when things slow down. "And did they slow down?" I asked quietly. "No," he said. "Time accelerated." At 59, he realized he barely remembered his children's childhoods. He had been physically present but mentally absent. "I missed ordinary Tuesdays," he said, "and ordinary Tuesdays are life." That sentence landed heavily. He reached into his wallet and unfolded a small worn piece of paper. On it was a handwritten Japanese phrase with its translation beneath. "Better to hold $60 today than chase $120 tomorrow." "I learned this from a colleague decades ago," Daniel said, "but I only understood it when my wife had a serious health scare. Suddenly, the future I had been planning felt fragile." He paused. "I had built detailed plans for retirement trips, but I had ignored simple breakfast with her. I was investing in decades that weren't guaranteed while overlooking mornings that were. I felt my throat tighten. So what does it actually mean? I asked. It means certainty matters. Presence matters. A guaranteed moment today holds more value than a hypothetical promise tomorrow. If you spend your life chasing the extra $120, you may lose the $60 already in your hand. He leaned back gently. It's not about irresponsibility. It's about balance. Plan. Yes. Grow. Absolutely. But do not sacrifice the entire present for a future that may simply become another stepping stone. His words hit something deep inside me. I had treated the present like a waiting room, like a hallway between real achievements. But what if the hallway was the house? What do I do? I asked him. And this time, my voice wasn't analytical. It was urgent. Daniel smiled softly when I asked what I should actually do. You begin, he said, by asking yourself a simple question. What do I already have today that I keep ignoring because I'm chasing tomorrow? That sentence followed me home. The change wasn't dramatic. I didn't wake up the next morning as a new person. No sudden enlightenment. No cinematic transformation. It felt more like someone opened a curtain in a room that had been dark for years. The following day I woke up at 12 a.m., but for the first time I didn't jump out of bed like a machine executing a command. I stretched. I noticed the sunlight on the wall. Dust floating in the air. The quiet. It sounds insignificant. For me, it was revolutionary. At breakfast, I placed my phone on the counter instead of next to my plate. I drank coffee without reading productivity articles. I tasted it. Actually tasted it. I realized I had forgotten how to do one thing at a time. At work, I greeted people. Not the automatic nod while thinking about deadlines, but real eye contact, real attention. A coworker, Emma, laughed lightly and said, "You seem different today. Something good happened?" I paused before answering. "Yes," I said slowly. "I finally showed up. But change is not an event. Change is a repetition of choices." About 2 weeks later came the real test. My manager called me into his office and offered me a major project. Bigger visibility, long hours, weekends included. It might open doors in the future. The old version of me would have accepted before the sentence finished. This time I stopped. Inside my mind, I asked a new question. What will this cost me today? I already knew the answer. I had planned to visit my brother and spend time with my nephew, a kid I barely knew despite being family. I had also scheduled a small trip into the forest, something I had postponed for years because it wasn't productive. "Can I think about it and answer tomorrow?" I asked. He looked surprised. "It's a great opportunity." "I know," I replied. "I just want to evaluate it honestly." That night I didn't calculate promotions, salary projections, or reputation. I calculated presence. Not what this could bring in 8 months, but what it would take this week. And I declined. It felt terrifying. Every old instinct screamed, "You're sabotaging your future." But a calmer voice answered, "You're finally choosing $60 today instead of gambling on $120 tomorrow." Nothing catastrophic happened. I wasn't fired. I didn't lose respect. Life continued, except something inside me changed. Pressure disappeared. That weekend I visited my brother. We played, talked, laughed. My nephew climbed into my lap and fell asleep against my chest. And I realized something irreversible. If I had taken that project, this moment would have been erased forever. There are opportunities you can repeat. There are moments you cannot. Later, I went alone into the forest. No signal, no notifications, no deadlines. At first, my mind panicked. "You're wasting time. You should be working. This doesn't move you forward." But on the second day, I sat beside a small stream, and the noise stopped. No past, no future, only awareness. For the first time in years, I experienced stillness that wasn't exhaustion, peace that didn't depend on achievement. When I returned, my job hadn't changed. I had. I began practicing Daniel's principle everywhere. After finishing a project, I celebrated before planning the next. I thanked the team sincerely. I allowed completion to feel complete. When meeting friends, I put my phone away. Conversations deepened. People stayed longer. They didn't just hear me. They felt me. I cooked meals not to optimize nutrition, but to experience creation. I picked up my guitar again, badly, imperfectly, joyfully. Presence made ordinary things meaningful. There's a modern word for this, awareness. But the wisdom is ancient. Every moment happens only once. You cannot stop the waves of the future from coming, but you can learn to stand fully where your feet already are. I finally understood something powerful. Life isn't waiting ahead. Life is happening while you wait. There is another idea I later discovered that deepened everything I had begun to understand. Each meeting happens only once. Not metaphorically, literally. No conversation will ever repeat with the same emotions, the same thoughts, the same version of you sitting in that chair again. The moment passes and takes its exact shape with it forever. When that realization settled into me, I felt something uncomfortable but liberating. I had been living as if time were refundable, as if days could be exchanged later for better ones. They cannot. About 7 months after my conversation with Daniel in the cafe, the shift inside me became visible to other people. One evening, I received a message from my ex, Emma. "Hey, I saw your photos. You look peaceful. What happened to you?" We met for coffee a few days later. She watched me quietly for a while before speaking. "You're here," she said. "Before, even when you sat across from me, you were somewhere else." I nodded. "I used to live inside the next step," I admitted. "I never lived the step I was taking." She leaned forward slightly. "So what changed?" I took a slow breath. I finally understood that holding $60 today matters more than chasing $120 tomorrow. She frowned, confused, and I explained everything. Daniel, the conversation, the idea that I had spent years accumulating invisible debt. Not financial debt, life debt, missed mornings, delayed conversations, postponed laughter. People treated like future appointments instead of present experiences. I had been running toward a finish line that didn't exist. "There's no prize waiting at the end," I told her. "The race itself is the whole thing." And I was moving so fast I never saw where I actually was. She sat silently, absorbing it. After a moment, she asked softly, "So, are you happy now?" I thought carefully. "I don't think permanent happiness exists," I said. "But I'm present. I experience my life instead of planning it. And that feels better than any happiness I imagined 6 years ahead." We didn't reunite romantically, but the conversation mattered, because I could see she lived the same way I once had, constantly preparing, rarely experiencing. And that's when another realization formed. I wasn't unique. Almost everyone around me lived displaced in time, regretting the past or negotiating with the future while ignoring the only moment they could actually influence. At work, I never preached or tried to sound philosophical. I simply changed my questions. When someone panicked about deadlines, I asked, "What can you do right now? Not later, not tomorrow, right now." Something interesting happened. Their breathing slowed, their thinking sharpened, because anxiety feeds on imagination. What if I fail? What if it goes wrong? What if I'm not enough? But action feeds on presence. And when you act in the present, fear loses oxygen. I began to understand the deeper wisdom behind those old sayings. Today is not preparation for life. Today is life. This hour will never repeat. This conversation will never replay. This version of you will never exist again. So the real question isn't how to control the future. The real question is whether you are willing to experience the moment you already own. There was one detail about the idea Daniel shared that took me longer to understand. Most people misunderstand it. Choosing today over tomorrow does not mean becoming careless. It does not mean abandoning discipline, ignoring responsibility, or drifting through life reacting to impulses. The principle isn't against planning. It's against sacrificing the entire present in order to worship a hypothetical future. I still had ambitions. I still wanted progress. I still saved money and built skills. But the motivation changed. Before, I exercised because someday, maybe decades later, it would benefit my health. Now I train because I could feel my body working now. The sweat, the effort, the breath, the experience itself mattered. The future became a byproduct, not the reason. I still perform well at work. I completed projects, improved systems, supported the team. But I was no longer emotionally dependent on the next promotion. I worked well because I was working, not because I was bargaining with the future. If recognition came, it came. If it didn't, the day was still complete. And then something ironic happened. About 9 months after I declined that exhausting project, leadership approached me with a better role, more balanced, more aligned, more respectful of my time. Not because I chased it obsessively, because I had become fully present in what I was already doing. It was a strange paradox. The moment I stopped desperately hunting the future began moving toward me naturally. Another realization followed. My obsession with tomorrow had actually been avoidance. The present is unpredictable, imperfect, sometimes uncomfortable. It's easier to escape into a fantasy where happiness exists after the next achievement than to accept that fulfillment can exist inside an ordinary day. I had been postponing permission to feel alive. Daniel was right. Life is not a destination you finally reach. It is the path you continuously walk. And I had spent years sprinting so fast toward the horizon that I never noticed the landscape. Looking back, my story was simple. I lived in tension, constantly preparing for a moment that never arrived. I lost an opportunity I believed defined my future, and that loss forced me to question everything. I met someone who showed me a principle. A real moment today is more valuable than a perfect possibility tomorrow. I realized I had accumulated invisible debt, missed conversations, delayed relationships, postponed experiences, all for a future that was never guaranteed. So I began small. Pay attention during breakfast. Listen fully when someone speaks. Put the phone away. Feel time instead of measuring it. I chose family over status once, silence over noise once, presence over anticipation once. And those small decisions rewired my life. I learned something revolutionary. Life does not begin after the next goal. Life exists while you move toward it. Planning is useful, but only when it supports living, not replacing it. Tomorrow is uncertain. Today is owned. Happiness isn't located 5 years ahead. It is available inside awareness. Because in truth, the only moment you will ever directly experience is this one, right now. So the real question isn't whether the future will arrive the way you imagine. The real question is, are you living or waiting to live? Would you trade $60 today for a promise of $120 tomorrow? If these thoughts made you pause and reflect, keep exploring ideas that push you into action instead of delay. And ask yourself, what moment are you postponing because you're too focused on the future? And comment below. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, I need to ask you a question. Did you know that planning can be procrastination disguised as productivity? That's right. And comment below.